I hated the way she smiled at me. It wasn't just a normal smile. It felt like a challenge, sharp and deliberate, as if she knew exactly how to get under my skin. Every time her lips curved that way, I felt this mix of anger and something else I couldn't name. I told myself it was pure hate. I told myself she was my rival, my enemy, the one person I could never stand. But if that was true, then why couldn't I look away? Why did my chest tighten every time her eyes met mine? Why, when I lay awake at night, did I keep seeing that same smile in the dark and wondering what it would feel like to kiss it? I always told myself I hated her smile. It was too bright, too confident, too sure of itself. Every time she flashed it, I felt like she was daring me, mocking me, reminding me that she was always one step ahead. It didn't matter if it was in class, in a competition, or just passing by in the hallway. She had this way of curving her lips that felt like an attack. I couldn't stand it. At least, that's what I tried to believe. The first time I saw that smile, it was in the middle of a crowded room. Heat and noise everywhere, and she had just beat me at something I thought I was good at. I remember how my stomach twisted when she looked straight at me, her grin almost careless, as though my effort hadn't even been worth noticing. That was the moment I decided she was my rival, the girl I would never lose to again. I hated her from that very second. Or maybe I wanted to convince myself that I did, because there was something else there, something harder to admit, even to myself. She was radiant in a way that made me uncomfortable. Her presence filled the room, and it didn't seem to take any effort on her part. People liked her, they gravitated toward her, and it made me feel small in comparison. Every time she walked in, laughter followed, attention followed. She didn't have to fight for it the way I did. And maybe that was the real reason her smile cut so deep. It wasn't just arrogance, it was power. She had something I wanted, but could never hold on to. And when her eyes landed on me, it felt like she knew. But here's the strange thing. The more I tried to hate her, the more I noticed her. I noticed the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was nervous. A little quick movement that she probably didn't even realize she did. I noticed the way her laughter changed depending on who she was with. Loud and carefree with her friends, but softer, almost secret, when something truly amused her. I caught myself memorizing these little details, even as I rolled my eyes and pretended I couldn't stand her. It was maddening. Why did my brain hold on to these things about her when all I wanted was to focus on beating her? Our rivalry became the thing people around us joked about. They said our arguments had energy, that we pushed each other harder than anyone else did. They thought it was entertaining, maybe even inspiring. But for me, it was personal. Every time she smiled at me, every time she looked like she had the upper hand, I burned inside. I worked harder, stayed up longer, and pushed myself just to prove that I could match her. But even when I succeeded, even when I managed to win, it never felt enough. Because she'd still smile, like she didn't mind losing. Like it didn't change anything at all. That smile had haunted me. I hated how easily it lived in my mind. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the curve of her lips, the glint in her eyes. Sometimes I imagined wiping it off her face, proving I was better. Other times the thought took a different shape when I couldn't explain, when I didn't want to admit. My stomach would twist in a way that wasn't anger, and my chest would tighten in a way that didn't feel like hate. I told myself it was just obsession. She was my rival. Rivals get under your skin. Rivals keep you awake at night. That was normal. At least, that's what I repeated over and over. But the truth bled through in moments I couldn't control. Like the time we brushed shoulders in the hallway and I felt heat bloom through me, so suddenly I forgot how to breathe. Or the time I caught her watching me when she thought I wasn't looking, her lips twitching like she was holding back that very smile I swore I despised. And worst of all, the way my heart raced every time her gaze met mine, as if it had been waiting for her attention. How could I explain that to myself? How could I hate someone and want her eyes on me in the same breath? I told myself it was confusion, nothing more. I didn't like her. I couldn't like her. I only wanted to win, to stand above her, to see her finally defeated. That's why my pulse quickened. That's why I thought about her too much. That's why her smile wouldn't leave me alone. It was all just part of the rivalry. It had to be. And yet, as much as I tried to cage those feelings, the thought pressed harder against me with each passing day. I hated her smile, but there was a pull, a question, something whispering beneath all that anger. If I truly hated her, why did I sometimes imagine what it would feel like to touch her face, to close the space between us, to kiss the very smile I claimed to despise? The thought was terrifying. The thought was impossible. But it was there, buried under every glare, every argument, every whispered denial. And deep down, I knew it wasn't going away. The rivalry between us only seemed to grow stronger with every passing day. It wasn't just a matter of competition anymore. It had become the air I breathed, the thread pulling me forward. Whenever she was in the room, I couldn't focus on anything else. Every word out of her mouth felt like a challenge. Every glance, every smirk, every too perfect smile, it was all fuel, fire burning under my skin. I told myself it was anger, irritation, hatred, but it was becoming harder and harder to separate what I really felt. I noticed her too much. I felt her presence too sharply. And sometimes when no one was watching, I caught myself wondering if she noticed me just as much. We clashed in ways that made people stare. In class discussions, our voices always rose above everyone else's, sharp words cutting back and forth like blades. I hated how clever she was, how quick her mind worked. She always had a response, always turned my words back on me with that infuriating curve of her lips. And yet, underneath the irritation, I felt something else, a kind of thrill, like I was alive only when we were fighting. The way her eyes locked with mine, the way her expression sharpened, the way her voice seemed to lower slightly when it was just the two of us, it all made my pulse quicken in ways I couldn't explain. I tried to push the feelings away, tried to bury them under my determination to beat her. I studied harder, practiced longer, poured myself into every project as though proving myself against her was the only thing that mattered. But even when I won, even when I managed to come out on top, it never felt complete. Because she would smile at me in that way, a smile that wasn't bitter or resentful, but strangely warm, like she appreciated the fight. That smile disarmed me. It made victory feel hollow, because instead of enjoying the win, I was left wondering why she could still look at me like that, like I wasn't her enemy at all. There was one day that unsettled me more than any other. I made a mistake in front of everyone, something small but embarrassing, and for a moment I felt exposed. My chest tightened, and I thought she would laugh, that she would throw it back in my face. But she didn't. Instead, she covered for me, smoothly shifting the attention away, giving me time to gather myself. No one noticed except me. She hadn't done it to humiliate me or to use it against me later. She had protected me in the quietest, simplest way. I didn't thank her, I couldn't. Instead, I pretended it hadn't happened, but that moment burned inside me. Why would she help me when we were supposed to be rivals? Why would she show kindness when I expected cruelty? I tried to ignore it, but the memory stayed. It made me pay even closer attention to her, as if I could uncover the reason. I began to notice the small ways she seemed to look out for me, like the time she handed me a pen without saying anything when mine ran dry, or the way she paused just a fraction too long when I stumbled over my words, giving me the chance to find them again. None of it matched the image of her I had built up in my head, the arrogant rival I swore I despised. She wasn't supposed to be kind. She wasn't supposed to make me feel seen. But the more I tried to build that wall of hate, the more cracks appeared. I caught myself staring at her too long when she laughed, not with the mocking edge I thought I hated, but with genuine joy. I noticed how her eyes softened when she talked about something she loved, how her expression shifted when she thought no one was looking. There were layers to her that I had ignored, hidden beneath the surface of our endless competitions, and once I began to see them, I couldn't stop. And though I clung to my anger, though I repeated to myself that I hated her, a part of me knew the truth was slipping through my I began to realize that it wasn't just me chasing her. She was chasing me too. Her attention never strayed, not really. Even when others surrounded her, she seemed to look for me, to test me, to push me harder than she pushed anyone else. And I couldn't help but ask myself, if she truly hated me, why did she always seem so invested in every word I said, every move I made? Why did it feel like our rivalry mattered to her as much as it did to me? That thought haunted me. It made me question everything I thought I knew about what existed between us. I tried to smother it with excuses, telling myself it was all in my head. But when I looked into her eyes, when I felt that current running through the air between us, it was impossible to deny. Something lived there, hidden beneath the sharp words and forced scowls. Something we both refused to name. And though I clung to my anger, though I repeated to myself that I hated her, a part of me knew the truth was slipping through my fingers. I didn't just hate her smile. I was drawn to it. It made me restless, made me feel alive in ways I didn't understand. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't stop imagining what it would mean if it wasn't just a smile meant to taunt me. What if it was something else? What if it was meant for me and only me? It happened on a day I least expected. I was already on edge, the kind of day where nothing seemed to go right, where every small mistake stacked on top of the last until I felt like I was suffocating under the weight of it. My mind was racing, my hands were shaking, and though I kept telling myself to breathe, to hold it together, I couldn't. And then, of course, she noticed. She always noticed. I tried to pretend I was fine, tried to bury it under a sharp comment and a steady stare, but her eyes lingered on me in a way that stripped me bare. For the first time, her voice wasn't sharp, wasn't teasing or mocking. She asked quietly, almost gently, "Are you okay?" And that question shattered me more than if she had laughed. I wanted to snap back, to tell her it wasn't her business, to protect myself with the usual armor of rivalry. But the softness in her tone stopped me. It wasn't pity, it wasn't superiority, it was concern. Genuine, unguarded concern. And for one dangerous moment, I almost told her the truth. I almost admitted how heavy everything felt, how the pressure of constantly competing, constantly proving myself was breaking me. Instead, I swallowed it all back down, hiding behind a wall of silence. Yet her gaze lingered, and something in my chest shifted. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The way her expression had softened, the way her smile had been absent, replaced by something warmer, deeper. I replayed the sound of her voice, the question that was simple, but somehow cut through every wall I had built. I wondered what would have happened if I had answered honestly. The thought unsettled me, because maybe for the first time I wanted her to see me, not as her rival, not as her equal or opponent, but as a person. Vulnerable. Human. And that terrified me. The universe, of course, had a way of pushing us together at the worst times. A project landed in our laps, one we couldn't escape. We were paired as a team, forced to spend long hours side by side. At first, I bristled. I told myself I'd rather work alone, that I didn't need her help, that she would only get in the way. But as the hours stretched on, as the nights grew longer, the sharpness between us began to fade. It wasn't gone, not completely. We still argued, still snapped at each other, but there was a new rhythm to it. It felt less like war and more like banter, almost like we had fallen into a strange kind of dance we both knew by heart. One night, we sat across from each other, papers spread everywhere, the clock ticking well past midnight. The room was quiet, the world outside asleep, and the sharp edges between us softened in the dim light. We argued, yes, but then she said something unexpectedly funny, and I laughed before I could stop myself. The sound surprised me, startled me because it felt so easy, so unguarded. And when I looked up, she was smiling, not the grin I claimed to hate, not the victorious smirk she wore in competitions, but a smaller, gentler smile that reached her eyes. For a moment, I forgot to breathe. We kept working, and the tension shifted. It was no longer about who would win, who would outshine the other. It became about the way our hands brushed, when we both reached for the same paper. The way our knees bumped under the table, sending sparks racing up my skin. The way her eyes lingered on me when she thought I wasn't looking, and the way I pretended not to notice, even though I noticed everything. It was unbearable, this closeness, because every second felt like a battle between what I told myself I felt and what my body betrayed me with. My heart raced when she leaned closer, when her shoulder pressed against mine, when her breath touched the air between us. I told myself it was just tension, the kind that comes from rivalry, from being forced to work with someone I claimed to hate. But deep down, I knew it wasn't true. The air between us wasn't heavy with hate. It was heavy with something else, something unnamed but impossible to ignore. At one point, our hands touched fully, not by accident, but because we both reached for the same thing and neither of us pulled away. For the briefest moment, time seemed to still. Her hand was warm against mine, steady, and the world around us blurred into silence. My chest tightened, my throat closed, and every nerve in my body screamed to move away. But I didn't. I let it linger, just for a heartbeat, and when I finally looked up, her eyes were already on me. There was no mockery in them, no triumph, just something else. Something I didn't have the courage to name. I pulled my hand back quickly, covering the moment with a joke, pretending it hadn't meant anything. She laughed softly, as though she understood, as though she could read the panic I was trying so desperately to hide. That night, when I finally went home, I couldn't stop replaying it in my mind. The softness of her voice when she asked if I was okay. The way her smile had turned gentle under the glow of midnight lamps. The warmth of her hand against mine. These were not the things of hate, not the weapons of rivalry. These were cracks in the armor, glimpses of something deeper. And though I tried to bury it, tried to tell myself it didn't matter, I couldn't deny the truth building inside me. Maybe I didn't hate her smile after all. Maybe I hated the way it made me feel, weak, exposed, alive. And maybe, just maybe, I was starting to realize that what I felt wasn't hate at all. I could not stop thinking about her. It was ridiculous, infuriating, and yet every time I closed my eyes, her face appeared behind my eyelids. That same smile I had sworn I despised was etched into my mind, but had shifted. It wasn't the grin of arrogance anymore, not the victorious smirk that once made my blood boil. Now, when I thought about it, I remembered the softness I had seen late at night under the tired lamplight, the way it had reached her eyes and touched something raw inside me. I told myself I was just distracted, that it was only the stress of the project, only the exhaustion of sleepless nights, but deep down I knew better. I wasn't just noticing her anymore, I was obsessing over her. Every little detail stuck with me. The way she tapped her pen against the desk when she was thinking. The way her lips pursed in concentration, like she was holding back words she wanted to say. The way her eyes lit up when she explained something she was passionate about, and how her whole body leaned forward as though she wanted the world to feel it too. I replayed these things in my mind over and over like a song I couldn't turn off. It was maddening. I should have been annoyed. I should have focused on the rivalry, the competition, the reason I had convinced myself I hated her in the first place. But instead, I was lying awake at night, wondering how her skin might feel against mine, wondering what it would be like to reach out and touch her, wondering if her smile would taste as warm as it looked. It scared me more than anything else ever had. I didn't want to admit it, not even to myself, but the truth was becoming impossible to ignore. Every time she walked into the room, I felt it. The shift in the air, the way my body tightened, the way my heart stumbled into a rhythm that wasn't steady anymore. I would tell myself to look away, to focus on anything else, but my eyes always betrayed me. They found her across the room, like magnets pulling against my will. And sometimes I caught her looking too. Sometimes her gaze lingered a moment too long. Her cheeks flushed a shade deeper than usual, and her smile curved differently, less like a weapon, more like a secret. Our arguments changed. They still happened, but the energy was different. There was something sharp beneath them, yes, but there was also something playful, something that made my stomach twist. One night it hit me so hard, I almost said it out loud. We had been working side by side, our shoulders brushing occasionally, the heat of her body seeping through my skin like fire. She leaned close to explain something, her voice soft and steady, and I caught the faintest whiff of her perfume. My chest tightened so painfully that I had to sit back, afraid she might hear the pounding of my heart. I wanted to kiss her. The thought came uninvited, crashing into me so suddenly that I froze. I wanted to lean across the small space and press my lips to hers. I wanted to see if her smile would feel different when it was that close. The realization shook me to my core. For weeks, I had been telling myself it was just confusion, just obsession, just rivalry. But no, this wasn't hate. It never had been. It was something far more dangerous, far more impossible to control. I couldn't say it, not yet. I couldn't even admit it fully to myself without choking on the words. But in that moment, staring at her profile under the glow of the lamp, the soft shadow brushing across her cheek, I whispered it in my head. I don't just hate your smile. I want to kiss it. And that thought lit me up from the inside, terrifying and intoxicating all at once. The days that followed were unbearable. Every interaction with her was laced with that secret knowledge, the truth I was trying to keep buried. When she laughed, I wanted to touch her. When she argued, I wanted to close the distance and stop her words with my mouth. When she looked at me, my chest hurt with the weight of all the things I wasn't saying. I had never felt so restless in my life. It was like carrying a storm inside me, one that threatened to break free every time she came near. The worst part was that I started to believe she felt it too. The way her gaze lingered, the way her laughter softened when it was just the two of us, the way her voice dipped when she asked me questions. It was all there, subtle but undeniable. It made me crazy because I didn't know how much of it was real and how much of it was just my heart twisting the truth. I wanted her. God, I wanted her so badly. But I was terrified of what that meant, terrified of what it would change. And so I carried the weight of it, pretending to hate her, pretending that nothing had shifted between us. But every time she smiled, every time her lips curved in that way that once drove me mad with anger, I now felt something else entirely. Desire, curiosity, longing. It was as though the very thing I had despised most about her had become the thing I craved the most. And no matter how hard I fought it, I couldn't escape the truth anymore. I didn't hate her smile. I wanted to kiss it. I wanted to claim it, to feel it against mine, to see if the electricity that ran between us would explode the way I thought it would. And once I admitted that to myself, even silently, there was no going back. The rivalry, the sharp words, the denial, all of it was just a mask, and beneath it lived the truth I could no longer control. I wasn't her enemy. I was someone who had been falling for her, slowly, painfully, helplessly, from the very beginning. It happened slowly, like a door I didn't even realize was opening until I was already stepping through it. We were still working together on the project, our days blurring into late nights, the arguments thinning into something softer, the silences stretching longer than they used to. At first, I told myself it was just exhaustion making me let my guard down, but that wasn't the truth. I could feel the shift between us with every passing hour. The walls I had built out of rivalry and resentment were cracking, piece by piece, and through them I was starting to see her for who she really was. Not the rival I had painted in my mind. Not the enemy I had clung to as motivation. She was something else entirely, something terrifyingly human, something unbearably close. One night, we sat in near silence, our books and papers scattered across the table, the clock ticking somewhere behind us. I was too tired to fight, too tired to put on the mask of sharp words and cold indifference. She noticed. She always noticed. "You're quiet," she said softly, not in her usual teasing way, but with a kind of careful curiosity. The sound of her voice disarmed me. I should have shrugged it off, should have brushed it away with sarcasm, but instead I looked at her and said, "I'm just tired." It wasn't the full truth, but it was more honesty than I had ever given her before. Something in her expression shifted. She didn't laugh or smirk or throw my words back at me. Instead, she nodded, her eyes warm in a way that made my chest ache. "Yeah," she said, almost to herself. "Me too." And then, as though the air between us demanded it, we talked. Not about the project, not about winning or losing, but about things I hadn't planned to share. Little pieces of myself slipped out without me meaning to. The pressures I carried, the fear of never being enough, the endless drive that felt less like ambition and more like desperation. I didn't know why I was telling her these things, why my voice didn't catch in my throat the way it usually did when I was vulnerable. But with her, in that moment, it felt almost safe. To my surprise, she shared too. She told me about her own fears, her own insecurities that she kept hidden behind the same confident smile I had once hated. She admitted how exhausting it was to always be seen as the strong one, how sometimes she envied the way I never gave up, even when things were stacked against me. Hearing that from her, hearing that she saw me not as someone to crush, but as someone to admire, unraveled me more than anything else could have. All this time, I had painted her as untouchable, as someone who had everything I didn't. But here she was, sitting across from me, admitting she was just as fragile, just as unsure. And for the first time, I felt like we weren't rivals at all. We were equals. The laughter came easier after that, threaded through our words like it had always been waiting there. At one point, she made a face while trying to explain something, and I laughed so hard I couldn't stop. She laughed too, her shoulders shaking, her head tilted back, and for the first time I wasn't trying to deny how beautiful she looked. I didn't even try to look away. I wanted to memorize the sound, the way her eyes softened when they met mine in the quiet that followed. My heart thudded hard against my ribs, but instead of shoving the feeling down, I let it sit there. I let it exist. There was a moment later, after the laughter faded, when silence stretched between us, and something charged filled the air. We were sitting close, closer than we had any right to, our hands resting just inches apart on the table. The lamp threw shadows across her face, highlighting the curve of her cheek, the shape of her lips. My chest tightened with the thought that had been haunting me for days. I wanted to kiss her. I wanted to lean in and close the space between us, to feel her smile against mine, to know if the electricity running through my veins was real. But I didn't move. Neither of us did. Instead, we sat there, suspended in that moment, our eyes locked as though we were both caught in the same storm, but too afraid to let it break. My throat ached with the words I couldn't say, the confession lodged somewhere deep inside me. I thought I saw it in her too, the way her breath caught, the way her lips parted slightly as if she wanted to speak, but couldn't. We stayed there, hovering on the edge of something dangerous, until the sound of the clock broke through, and I forced myself to look away. The rest of the night passed in fragments. Small smiles, softer words, lingering glances that neither of us addressed. It wasn't a confession, not yet. It wasn't a kiss, but it was something. It was the beginning of a truth we were both too afraid to name. I walked home that night with my chest aching, my mind replaying every detail, my skin still buzzing from the closeness we hadn't dared to cross. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I realized just how far I had fallen. The rivalry that had once defined us was gone, replaced by something rawer, something I couldn't fight no matter how hard I tried. I didn't just want to beat her anymore. I didn't just want to outshine her. I wanted her. I wanted her laugh, her warmth, the way she saw me when no one else did. I wanted all of it, and though I still didn't have the courage to admit it, even to her, I knew that night had changed everything. The walls between us weren't just cracking anymore, they were crumbling. And once they were gone, there would be no pretending left. The days that followed were unbearable in a way I couldn't explain. Nothing had actually been said between us, no lines had been crossed, and yet everything felt different. Every time I saw her, my chest grew heavy with the weight of the silence we both carried. It was in the way our eyes lingered a fraction too long, the way our laughter came a little too easily when we were alone, the way the air shifted whenever she leaned close. It was like we were both holding our breath, caught in a fragile balance neither of us dared to break. I told myself over and over to keep it together, to bury the feelings before they consumed me. But my body refused to obey. My heart would race the moment she entered the room. My skin would tingle when her arm brushed mine. And my thoughts betrayed me at every turn. I noticed how she had started to show her care in little ways, as though she couldn't hide it anymore. She would slide her chair closer to mine during work without thinking about it, and though she pretended it was practical, I knew it wasn't. She would save me a seat next to her without saying a word, a small act that no one else seemed to notice but me. Once, in the middle of a heated discussion, someone interrupted me, and before I could defend myself, she did it for me. Her voice was firm, protective, and the way she glanced at me afterward made my chest ache with something I didn't want to name. She wasn't supposed to look at me that way, like I mattered more than I should. And yet I craved it. I craved it so much it terrified me. Our conversations shifted too. They were no longer about competition or proving who was smarter, sharper, stronger. They had a softness woven through them, a subtle tenderness hidden beneath the sarcasm and teasing. Sometimes she would ask me questions about things no one else cared about, like what music I listened to when I was alone, or what place in the world I dreamed of seeing one day. I answered cautiously at first, but the way she listened, the way her expression softened as though my words meant something, made me open up more than I ever thought I would. I began to see how much she truly saw me, how carefully she paid attention to things I thought went unnoticed. But for every soft moment, there was fear. Fear that I was imagining it, that I was reading into things that weren't really there. Fear that she was only being kind, that she didn't feel the same pull I did. Fear that if I confessed what lived inside me, she would laugh, or worse, pull away completely. I was trapped in that constant loop of wanting her and being terrified of wanting her. I couldn't tell anyone, couldn't speak the words even to myself out loud, but I knew. I knew in the way my pulse stuttered whenever her hand brushed mine. I knew in the way I longed for her smile when she wasn't around. I knew in the way I replayed her voice at night, the sound of her laughter echoing in the quiet of my room. There was one afternoon when we sat side by side, both of us pretending to work, but neither of us truly focused. The space between us was so small that I could feel the warmth radiating from her, and every breath felt like a battle. I glanced at her, and for once she wasn't hiding. Her eyes met mine, steady and unflinching, and something unspoken passed between us. My stomach dropped, my chest tightened, and for a moment I thought she was going to say something. I thought the silence would finally break. But instead she smiled, a small, almost shy smile, and looked back at her papers as though nothing had happened. The world spun around me, but outwardly nothing changed. That night, lying awake again, I admitted something I hadn't before. I wasn't just afraid of what it would mean to want her. I was afraid of how much I already did. It wasn't a passing crush, not some fleeting distraction born from rivalry. It was deeper than that, sharper, heavier. She had become the gravity in my life, the thing I couldn't pull away from no matter how hard I tried. And it terrified me because I had no idea what to do with it. Yet, even in my fear, I couldn't deny the truth. Our connection was real. People around us started to notice, even if they didn't understand what they were seeing. Friends teased me about how much time I spent with her. Others commented on how intense we were together, how we seemed to push and pull each other in ways no one else did. I laughed it off, pretended it was just rivalry, but inside I knew. They saw the fire, even if they couldn't name it. The more I tried to bury it, the more it grew. I couldn't fight the way my body responded when she leaned close, the way my heart betrayed me when her laughter filled the air. And I couldn't ignore the way she looked at me sometimes, like she was carrying the same secret I was. Maybe she was. Maybe she was just as afraid, just as restless, just as caught in this silent storm. I wanted to tell her. I wanted to close the space between us once and for all. But the fear was louder than the longing. So instead, I stayed silent, smiling when she smiled, laughing when she laughed, aching quietly when her hands brushed but didn't stay. I convinced myself there would be time, that the moment would come when the weight of it all would finally spill over. But until then, I carried it inside me, heavy and unrelenting. And every day, the thought circled back like a haunting. I didn't hate her. I never had. I wanted her. I wanted her smile, her warmth, her touch. And no matter how tightly I tried to cage the feeling, it kept breaking free, piece by piece, until I knew there was no escape. It was late, the kind of late where the world outside had fallen silent, and only the faint hum of streetlights and the occasional rustle of wind filled the air. We had been working for hours, papers scattered across the table, empty cups and half-finished notes lying around like forgotten pieces of a storm. But neither of us was focused anymore. The project was long forgotten. What lingered was the silence between us, heavy and unrelenting, thicker than it had ever been. I could feel it pressing down on me, suffocating me, pulling me closer to something I had been running from for weeks. She sat across from me, her head bent as she pretended to read, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers tapped nervously against the page. She wasn't focused either. She was fighting the same storm I was, I knew it. My chest ached with every second that passed, with every breath I didn't take. I wanted to speak, to break the silence, to tear down the fragile wall that stood between us, but the words burned in my throat and refused to come out. What if I was wrong? What if this was all in my head, if every glance, every brush of her hand, every soft smile was nothing more than my imagination twisting reality into something it wasn't? But then her eyes lifted from the page and met mine, and in that moment I knew I wasn't imagining anything. The look she gave me was raw, unguarded, a mirror of everything I had been hiding. My breath hitched, and for a long moment, we just stared at each other, neither of us blinking, neither of us looking away. The silence stretched and grew, but it wasn't empty. It was alive, charged, like the air before a storm breaks. My heart pounded in my chest, every beat echoing in my ears, my palms sweaty against the table. I wanted to say something, anything, but my voice betrayed me, caught somewhere deep inside. So instead, I leaned back slightly, hoping to ease the intensity, but she leaned forward. Her movement was small, subtle, but it was enough to steal the air from my lungs. She was close now, closer than she had ever been, her presence wrapping around me like a flame I couldn't escape. "You've been quiet," she said softly, her voice barely more than a whisper. But it wasn't the words that shattered me, it was the way she said them, like she already knew the answer, like she was testing the waters of a truth we both couldn't ignore anymore. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, my heart beating so loudly I was sure she could hear it. "I've just been thinking," I managed, my voice rough, unsteady. Her lips curved into that smile, the one I had once sworn I hated, the one that now undid me completely. It was softer this time, vulnerable, almost hesitant. "Thinking about what?" she asked, and though her tone was calm, I could see the flicker of fear in her eyes, the same fear that lived in mine. I could have lied. I could have deflected like I always did, brushed it off with sarcasm or distraction. But I was so tired of pretending, so tired of carrying this weight alone. The truth pressed against my chest, begging to be freed, and for the first time I didn't fight it. "You," I whispered, barely loud enough to hear, but the moment the word left my mouth, her breath caught. Her fingers stilled, her eyes widened, and the world seemed to freeze around us. For a second, panic surged through me. I wanted to take it back, to swallow the confession before it ruined everything. But then she moved. Slowly, carefully, she leaned closer, her eyes never leaving mine, her expression soft but determined. "Me?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly, as though she needed to hear me say it again. "Yes." I breathed, the word tumbling out before I could stop it. My hands shook, my heart thundered, and every part of me screamed with both fear and relief. "I can't stop thinking about you." The silence after my confession was unbearable, stretching out like a blade hovering between us. But then, just when I thought I had made the biggest mistake of my life, her lips curved into the gentlest smile I had ever seen. "I was hoping you'd say that," she whispered. The space between us dissolved in an instant. I didn't remember moving, didn't remember deciding, but suddenly we were leaning into each other, the table forgotten, the air heavy with everything we had been holding back. My breath mingled with hers, my heart racing so hard it felt like it might break me apart. And then it happened. Her lips touched mine, soft and tentative at first, a question more than an answer. My eyes fluttered shut as heat surged through me, every nerve in my body alive with the electricity of that single moment. The kiss deepened slowly, carefully, as though we were both afraid to move too fast, afraid to shatter the fragile magic of it. Her lips were warm, her touch steady as her hand brushed against mine, fingers tangling hesitantly until they intertwined. I melted into her, every ounce of rivalry and hate dissolving into something I couldn't even put into words. It wasn't just a kiss. It was a breaking, a healing, a confession neither of us could have spoken out loud, but both of us had been screaming inside for so long. When we finally pulled back, breathless and trembling, I searched her face for regret, for doubt, for anything that would undo the fragile hope blooming in my chest. But all I saw was her, smiling softly, her eyes shining in a way that made me feel like the world had shifted on its axis. "I've wanted to do that for so long," she admitted, her voice shaky but full of relief. A laugh broke from me, shaky and disbelieving, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. "Me too," I whispered, my chest tight with the overwhelming flood of emotion. For the first time, there were no walls between us, no masks, no lies. Just us. The night carried on, but everything had changed. We sat closer than we ever had, our hands still tangled together, our smiles softer, our words gentler. The rivalry that had once defined us was gone, replaced by something far more terrifying and beautiful. Love. Raw, messy, undeniable love. And as I sat there, my heart finally at peace, I realized something I never thought I would. I didn't hate her smile. I never had. I loved it. I loved it so much it hurt. And now, finally, I could admit it, not just to myself, but to her. The morning light crept through the blinds, soft and golden, painting the room with a warmth that felt almost unreal. For a moment, I didn't move. I just lay there, staring at the way the light fell across the table where our books and papers still sat in messy piles, the remnants of the night that had changed everything. My heart felt heavy and light all at once, as though it couldn't decide whether to float or to sink. I turned my head slowly, and there she was, sitting on the edge of the couch, her hair a little tangled, her expression soft as she looked down at her hands. She hadn't noticed I was watching, and for the first time, I saw her without the armor she always wore, without the fire of competition in her eyes. She looked vulnerable, almost fragile, and it struck me so hard I had to catch my breath. I remembered the kiss, every detail etched into me like it was written in fire, the way her lips had felt against mine, hesitant but sure, like she'd been waiting for it as long as I had, the way her hand had held onto mine, grounding me, making me feel like I wasn't falling but being caught. It had replayed in my mind all night, even when I tried to close my eyes. Now, in the quiet light of morning, it almost felt like a dream, except she was right there, real and alive and close enough to touch. When she finally lifted her head and noticed me, she smiled. It wasn't the confident, teasing smile I had always claimed to hate. It was softer, warmer, something only meant for me. It was the kind of smile that unraveled every piece of armor I'd ever built around myself. My chest tightened, and before I could stop myself, I whispered, "Good morning." Her eyes lit up at the sound of my voice, and she laughed softly, a sound that felt like sunlight itself. "Good morning," she replied, her voice still hushed, like we were both afraid to break the fragile peace that hung between us. We didn't talk about the project. We didn't talk about our rivalry or all the arguments and competitions that had defined us before. None of it seemed to matter anymore. What mattered was the way her gaze lingered on me, the way her fingers fidgeted nervously like she didn't know what to do with them. What mattered was the silence between us, not heavy this time, but full of something new, something delicate and unspoken. "I didn't sleep much," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I kept thinking. "About what?" I asked, though I already knew. Her cheeks flushed, and she looked away for a moment before finding the courage to meet my eyes again. "About us. About what happened." She paused, her throat bobbing as she swallowed nervously. "And about how I don't want it to be just one moment." My breath caught in my chest. Those words, that confession, it was everything I hadn't even realized I needed to hear. My heart raced, but this time it wasn't with fear. It was with hope. Real, terrifying hope. I shifted closer, my hand brushing against hers, and when she didn't pull away, I laced my fingers through hers. "I don't want it to be just one moment either," I whispered. Her eyes softened, and for a long time we just sat there, holding on to each other, letting the truth settle between us. It wasn't going to be easy. I knew that. We had spent so long being rivals, building walls and pushing each other away, that letting all of that go wouldn't happen overnight. And outside of this little world we had built, there were questions waiting for us. What would people say? What would it mean to change everything they thought they knew about us? Could we face it? But none of those fears felt as heavy as they once did. Because sitting there with her, her hand warm in mine, her smile soft and unguarded, I knew that whatever came next, we could face it together. The day stretched on slowly, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to rush. We made coffee, we laughed about small things, we even teased each other gently, but it wasn't like before. The edge was gone. There was no sharpness, no battle to win. There was only us, discovering what it meant to look at each other without the mask of rivalry. It felt fragile, new, but it also felt like something that had been waiting for us all along. Later, when we stepped outside, the world looked different. Maybe it hadn't changed, but I had. We walked side by side, close enough that our arms brushed, and every touch sent a ripple through me. People still glanced at us, still whispered the way they always had, but for the first time I didn't care. Let them wonder, let them talk. I wasn't afraid of being seen with her anymore. As the sun set, we found ourselves on a quiet street, the sky painted in hues of pink and orange. She stopped walking and turned to me, her eyes searching mine with a seriousness that made my heart stumble. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I don't know how to go from hating each other to," she trailed off, biting her lip, "to loving each other." I finished for her, my own voice breaking on the word. Saying it out loud made my chest ache, but it was the kind of ache that came with truth, with honesty. She nodded slowly, her eyes glistening. "Yeah, to loving each other." I reached out, cupping her face in my hands, and for a moment we just stood there, the world around us fading into nothing. "We'll figure it out," I whispered. "Together." Her lips curved into that smile, the one that had once driven me mad but now felt like home. And when she kissed me again, under the fading light of day, I realized that I had never really hated her smile. I had only been afraid of how much I wanted it, how much I needed it. And now, finally, I didn't have to be afraid anymore.